Hi everyone. In today's video, I just wanted to go through the 6 different types of white blood cells that exist in a body. So these blood cells are overall very important for the survival of the body, as they are the main defense mechanism that exists with pathogenic molecules or any other type of cell that has the possibility of having a negative effect on the body. So firstly, I would like to talk about neutrophils. Now, neutrophils are quite I guess you could say, a common structure type cell, because the structure that neutrophils have is quite commonly seen in many other types of white blood cells. So if I was to draw one, it would look something like this. So obviously it would have a circular shape like a cell, but its nucleus would be highly lobed, as in that it would have many different sort of globular sections to it. So as you can see that this nucleus has 3 lobes. Now neutrophils are actually the most abundant white blood cell in the body, or in the blood. They are present in 50 to 70% of cases. That means that they're present in 50 to 70% of the total white blood cell count in the body. And the main mechanism by which they actually attack pathogens is that they ingest them and then kill them. And the main defense that they have is against infections. So, I don't know if you've heard of macrophages, but similar to macrophages, these neutrophils are able to essentially undergo phagocytosis with whatever pathogens present, and therefore they can allow for the death of the pathogen as it essentially enters a very acidic environment. And to assist with this breakdown, these neutrophils have very fine granules within their cytoplasm. And these granules allow for essentially the mechanical breakdown of the particular pathogen. Next, I'd like to talk about lymphocytes. Now, lymphocytes are one of the most important white blood cells in the body, as they have many different roles. So, lymphocytes, as a general structure, kind of look as if they have a very large nucleus, and this nucleus is what covers quite a lot of the cell. So, as we can see here, most of the cytoplasm is actually shrouded by this nucleus. And lymphocytes are present mainly, as their name suggests, in the lymph nodes, but also in the spleen, thymus gland, bone marrow, and gut wall. So as you can see, just based on the various places that they're present in, their role is quite important, because these are very important places for immune defense and also the maturation of red blood cells. These lymphocytes come in 2 main forms: B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Now, these B lymphocytes are quite special in that they are the lymphocytes that produce antigens. And antigens are actually I guess you could say, one of the most important parts of the defense system of the body, as they're able to recognize specific pathogens that enter the body and ensure that the specific immune response that's done towards them is correct. And they may be, for example, Y-shaped like this, and if a cell has a particular receptor that looks like that, they're able to bind to this receptor and induce a particular response. On the other hand, there are two main types of T lymphocytes that we see in the body. Firstly, helper T lymphocytes, which I'll write as helper TL, are sort of the command center for all T lymphocytes, and they are involved in directing around cytotoxic T lymphocytes, which I'll write as cytotoxic TL. Now, these cytotoxic lymphocytes are quite important because they are directly involved in the destruction of various pathogens or abnormal cells in the body. So these may be cells that have been infected by viruses, or even they can be cancer cells. So these lymphocytes in general are involved in cell-mediated immunity, and they're present in 20 to 40% of cases. So, to a lesser extent of neutrophils. After lymphocytes, we have monocytes. Monocytes are also quite important as well because they are able to differentiate into a very, very important cell. But firstly, in terms of their own structure, they look something like this. So, they have a circular shape. However, the nucleus is sort of a C shape. This leukocyte does not have any granules in its cytoplasm, and therefore its cytoplasm does appear clear. Instead, it is able to phagocytize pathogens, so phagocytosis is able to allow for the ingestion of pathogens. And it also allows for the presentation of antigens, which I did mention before were also part of B lymphocytes, and are also involved in the production of cytokines. Now, cytokines are quite important molecules, which I'll just go into a little bit of detail because it's not very much related to this topic of the types of white blood cells. But cytokines are mainly involved in what we call sickness behavior. So these cytokines are able to interact with various parts of the brain and therefore induce a certain behavior in the person that makes them feel sick. So, for example, they may lose certain interests in certain activities, or they may not have the same energy that they once had. And basically, all of the sort of behaviors that we associate with when someone's sick, these cytokines are the main driving force of that. And monocytes are, as I mentioned earlier, quite important in the body because they are able to differentiate into macrophages. And these macrophages are quite important as well because, as you may know, they also phagocytize pathogens, including bacteria. Monocytes, on the other hand, are not as present with as compared to neutrophils or lymphocytes. They're only present in 1 to 10% of cases. And therefore they're not always seen in all immune responses. The next cell that I'd like to go through are eosinophils. Now, these cells are actually quite similar to neutrophils in their structure. However, they have some subtle differences in the size of their granules. So if I were to draw one here, it would still have a lobed nucleus. So we would say that this nucleus has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lobes. However, the granules it would have within its cytoplasm would be quite large. This is obviously in reference to neutrophils. So, because these cells have such a similar structure, their mechanism of action is quite similar to neutrophils as well. They are able to phagocytize bacteria and other pathogens. And in this ingestion of these particles, they are able to be present in the linings of the body, as these are quite important parts of the body that must be protected, and are able to actually absorb quite a large number of pathogens at once. Unlike neutrophils, however, these eosinophils are actually involved in allergic responses. And it is thought that these cells also have some sort of response against parasites. Also, another difference against neutrophils is that unlike these cells, which are present in 50 to 70% of cases, eosinophils are only present in 1 to 4% of cases. Therefore, unlike neutrophils, they're present in a much smaller amount, and therefore their response in terms of a particular pathogen is much less pronounced. The final white blood cell that I would like to go through is the basophil. And if you've been taking note of the trend that's been happening, basophils are the least prominent white blood cell that is present in the body. These cells are only present in 1 to 2% of cases. And therefore, if you take a sample of blood from someone, it's highly unlikely that you'll actually see them in just a random blood smear. Now, these cells are given their name because they're highly basophilic. So if we were to look at them in a histology preparation under hematoxylin and eosin staining, we would see lots of granules in their cytoplasm. So these granules would be present in quite a numbered nature, and they would be quite large. And as they are basophilic, they would stain purple. And in this case, it's actually quite hard to see where the nucleus is in this cell because it has so many granules within its cytoplasm that essentially it's just covered in all of these. So it's very hard to actually see the nucleus. These basophils are also responsible for allergic responses. And the main way in which they are able to incite this response is through the release of histamine, which can cause inflammation, heparin, and serotonin. And these are all types of immune responses that the basophil can do in the face of a pathogen. Now, just to quickly go over all six leukocytes, that we've gone through today. So firstly, we went through neutrophils. These were fine granule cells with a lobe nucleus and ingested bacteria and other pathogens in the face of infection. Lymphocytes had a very large nucleus. They were present in lymph nodes, spleen, thymus, and bone marrow, and also came in two main types, one producing antigens, one commanding cytotoxic T cells, and one actually being the cytotoxic T cell. Then we looked at monocytes. These have a crescent-shaped nucleus and are present in phagocytizing pathogens and also presenting antigens. And also, they are able to differentiate into macrophages, which is our fourth type of leukocyte. And this cell is also involved in phagocytosis. Eosinophils, on the other hand, have coarse granules. They also phagocytize pathogens and are present in key places such as the linings of the body. And they are involved in allergic responses as well as parasites. And finally, we looked at basophils, and these are the least prominent white blood cell in the body. They are present in only 1 to 2% of cases, are involved in allergic responses, and release heparin, histamine, and serotonin. So, I just wanted to first and lastly give a mnemonic to help you guys remember the firstly, the different leukocytes that are present in the body, and secondly, the order in which they're present in the body. So this mnemonic is NLMEB, and it actually stands for Never Let Monkeys Eat Bananas. Now, this N stands for neutrophils, the L stands for lymphocytes, the M stands for monocytes, E stands for eosinophils, and B stands for basophils. Now, the interesting aspect of this mnemonic is that not only does it help you remember the different types of white blood cells that are present in the body, but it also allows you to remember the decreasing presence that they have in the blood. So, as we mentioned before, neutrophils are the most present, so let's just average it out to 60%. 60%. Lymphocytes, let's average it out to 30%. Monocytes, let's average it out to 7%. Eosinophils, average to 3%. And basophils, average to around 1.5%. So as you can see, this, mnemonic just gives you an indication of the relative presence of all of the leukocytes in the blood in decreasing order, and also will help you remember their names. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.